Welcome to let me start that over again. Welcome to episode number 298 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens, they're still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet here from Goulet Pens, and I want to wish you a happy Valentine's Day, because this is publishing on Valentine's Day. So there you go. Share the love. Tell someone close to you that you love them. In this episode, I'm going to be talking about Snorkel fillers, sheening ink inconsistency in cartridge pens, if there are any affordable oblique double broad nibs, updated Conklin feeds, difference between ballpoints and rollerballs, and swapping nibs out on a Delta Spaccanapoli. I got some good feedback. I got a fun fact about snowflakes. It's going to be a good time had by all today. So without further ado, let's start off with some feedback. I want to kick it off here with Ann Wagner, who says, "This was a great show," talking about last week. "Just what I needed at a stressful time. As you say, journaling and fountain pens can be really good for our mental health. As a graphic art historian and lapsed graphic artist, I find spending time journaling and just messing with pens and paper really enjoyable. Cleaning pens is actually kind of therapeutic." Well, that's really cool. And you are not the first person I've heard to find like the ritual of inking or cleaning pens, organizing, whatever it is, maintaining them, to be sort of a cathartic experience. In fact, that's part of why I like to put out regular videos like this that are a little more low key. You maybe don't have to pay as close of attention to everything I say. Hopefully you don't, because, I'm a little more free flowing in these things. But the idea is sort of like you have a friend there to hang out with you while you're doing your pen stuff. And more than a few people are like, this is the time where they clean their pens, or the time where they ink them up and play with some new inks and stuff like that. So great time had by all. Glad to be joining you as you're doing any of that. And yeah, that's something, the journaling thing for mental health, that's really, really been on my mind a lot recently. And got really good feedback from a bunch of you last week that really resonated with. So that's really cool. I've known about that for years and heard about it constantly from, people just kind of organically. But it's something that I'm like really thinking about a lot more in terms of like intentionality around that. So anyway, I'll just kind of put that out there, and don't be surprised if I start talking a little bit more about that as I explore it. So anyway, Holly C has a feedback here. Says, "I'm so glad that you're also turning to journaling about all the chaos in the world. This is exactly what I've been doing, and I agree that is helpful and allows me to be more at peace during the day. I try not to be obsessively looking at the news either. I can't change it, so I pay attention, but only as much as I need to." That is a great balance to strike there. Not always so easy to find, though. It goes on to say, "And I agree with allowing our pen hobby to remain our joy regardless of what happens." And then a question, "Do you import much from Canada?" I'm glad there's a pause, because since, I mentioned that there was going to be stuff that came out, at least there's like a 30-day pause on Mexico and Canada, the tariffs there. I'm glad there's a pause. I'm guessing that there will be an agreement in the end, but will that be an issue for you all? Thanks for the update. So the only brand that we carry that I think would be affected by that would be Ferris Wheel Press, because they're based out of Canada. Uncertain what will happen there. I imagine if there are tariffs that go into effect, those prices will have to go up. So hopefully that's not the case. Don't want to freak anybody out. We've been pendulum swung and whiplashed a lot in the last few weeks. So let's just see how it kind of settles out. And once there is solid news to report, I'll talk about it. All right. And then last question, or last feedback, I guess. Chunky Man Gamer says, "Did you stab your right hand with a fountain pen by mistake?" So Chunky Man here noticed the Band-Aid that I have on my palm. I didn't say anything about it last week. I thought about maybe saying something about it and then totally forgot as I was recording. But no, I did not stab myself with a fountain pen, though I have done that before. It's not a great story, but when I say what I did, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that sounds so interesting, but it's not that interesting. I actually burned it with a lighter that I was using to light my son's birthday candles with. And it was like, everybody was gathered around, all the friends were there. And as I'm trying to light the candles, I won't get into again, it's not that exciting a story, but just long story short, I ended up burning my hand right there. And it's literally as everybody's around, and I'm like, okay, and had to sort of just like kind of roll on right through. And then I took care of it. It really is okay. It's a little unsightly, so I covered it with a Band-Aid. But we're going on like 2+ weeks now at this point, so hopefully it'll be better soon. Anyway, yeah, so I got a bunch of new stuff to share with you all. Things are starting to roll in, so let's get on to that, shall we? All right, I got a lot of ink and I got a few pens. So let's start off with the ink, shall we? Speaking of Ferris Wheel Press, we have 3 new inks from them coming out. They're already available on our site. So Ferris Wheel Press Book of Botany. So this is some Peter Moss lore, if you're following any of the storylines within Ferris Wheel Press. So this is like a mossy green ink. Really nice looking the bottles. They look amazing. So 38 milliliters, $25. Definitely more of a premium ink, but it looks great. It's got a nice little story, and this is a very pleasant looking ink. Then we have another green. This is Ferris Wheel Press Lores of the Loch. This is part of the Princess Patch lore. So there's a story to go along with that. It's a vivid green with some added gold shimmer to it. So that's kind of cool. It's like a meadow kind of a green. It's kind of nice, kind of cool. Very different than the mossy green. And then this is also 38 mils for $25. And then we have one that's slightly more special. So this is Ferris Wheel Press's Blue Revelry. This is a limited edition ink that they're calling it. I don't know if it's limited to a certain number of bottles or anything like that, but in the past when they've had limited inks, they do get kind of limited. So have this one on your radar if it's interesting to you, and don't wait too long to get this particular one. This is celebrating Ferris Wheel Press's 15th anniversary. So it's like an anniversary ink. It's also cool because I didn't realize that our anniversaries were so close to each other, because we just hit 15 years back in November last year. So that's kind of cool. This is a royal blue ink, which of course I'm a fan of, and it's got a pink and green shimmer in it. It looks pretty wild, really cool. You should at least check the pictures out if nothing else. But I definitely snagged a bottle of this for myself. I don't keep every Ferris Wheel Press ink that comes through here, because I think I wouldn't be able to fit in my office anymore if I did. But I do keep the ones I really like. And, you know, if it's like a annual ink or an anniversary ink or something, especially because it's blue, I'm going to keep it. So anyway, 38 mils for $25 on this one too. So that's kind of cool. Let's move on to, we got a couple of Noodler's colors. Three in total. 2 of them are polar inks. So kind of fitting, because at least around here it's pretty dang cold. We're actually in the middle of a snow and ice storm right now. Fun fact. So 2 inks that they came out, the Polar ink. If you're not familiar with Polar, it's not just like some weird name. These are inks that are specifically formulated to be able to go below freezing without freezing. They can go quite low. So this is like people even in like, you know, very whatever, northern, or I guess not southern, because like Antarctica, but I actually have, I don't remember how long ago this was. It was a number of years ago, but we actually had somebody who used the Polar ink. They were a scientist studying in Antarctica, and they were using the ink successfully in Antarctica, which is kind of crazy. So yeah, it will resist freezing. So if that matters to you, it definitely has its use cases. But typically it's been pretty limited in terms of their color range, but Noodler's added 2 new colors that are kind of bold, right? So Polar Krill, if you know what krill, they're like little crustaceans that, you know, whales and other, and you know, sea-bearing creatures eat. It's a hot pink. Now, krill are not quite hot pink. They're a little more translucent, but still, you know, shrimp, krill, crustaceans, whatever. There's some pink ones out there. So it's a pretty hot pink color. It's kind of cool. And then the other one that's like, ooh, a little more attention grabbing even maybe, is Polar Blood Falls. Now you're like, oh, that's kind of weird. What is that? Well, Blood Falls is actually a thing. It's a phenomenon that happens in Antarctica. So this is down in the Taylor Glacier. It's into the West Lake Bonny in East Antarctica. And basically what it is a saltwater flow that has iron oxide that kind of plumes in the seawater, which makes it turn this like reddish kind of rusty color. It kind of looks like dried blood or something that's like flowing down through this like bright white glacier. It's very striking. And this ink kind of matches that. So it's a very, you know, bloody looking ink color if you're into that. But I know reds are pretty popular. I will say, this has a really, really long dry time. I don't know what it is about Blood Falls. Even like typically the Polar inks, they don't take that long to dry necessarily. They tend to like soak into the paper just a little bit more and kind of have like more of a flat tone to them. But Blood Falls, for whatever reason, just, you know, if you really dump the ink on there, it will take a while to dry. So just be aware of that. It's a nice color though. These are a little pricier than your average Noodler's inks, but still not a bad deal. $25.50 for 3 ounces of this ink. So, you know, it's about a third the cost of the Ferris wheel press, but much more pragmatic ink. You don't get the nearly as nice a packaging. And then there's one other Noodler's color. This is Prairie Flax. So this was actually introduced at the Colorado Pen Show in 2024. So it's, you know, it's themed after something Colorado related, I guess. But it's a nice blue ink, nice mid-range blue ink. Looks really good. $17 for 3 ounces of that. So not bad. Now moving on to pens, we have, well, we had 2 pens from Benu, Benu Euphoria Dragons. So they came out with 2 different dragon pens. There was Glassog and Dubhanak. I'm probably saying that wrong. They were like 2 different styles of dragon. I'll see if we can throw up a picture of both of those. As of when I'm recording this, Dubhanak is already sold out. All we have left is Glassog. The reason is these are hand-painted pens. They are only 93 of them are available worldwide of each pen, and we were allocated a certain amount of each one, and one of them sold out already. Probably the other one will be sold by the time this actually publishes. If so, I'm sorry. If it sells out so quick that we can catch it in time in editing, we'll just cut this whole section out. But if I'm cutting this section out, you would never hear that I'm cutting this section out. So you're only hearing this if I didn't end up cutting the section out, which means I might still have the pens. It's really hard to shoot this stuff like 3 days before it publishes, but here we are. These are $280 pens though. They're a little bit more expensive, but do not wait on these because they're gonna be gone. Get them where you can. Okay, we have a Goulet exclusive here from Retro 51, Vino. This is a special edition. We actually carried this a few years ago, sort of a revival, if you will. So this is a cork pen. So it's like a wine-themed, you know, Vino means wine. And the pen itself, it's not just like pattern of cork, it is actual cork. It's pretty cool feeling. The neat thing about cork too is, you know, it is absorbent and it will sort of patina over time as you hold it and touch it and your hand oils kind of get in it. So it sort of has an effect like wood where it will like sort of age a little bit as you use it. So that's kind of a fun little thing. And then it's got a little grape insert in the top of the cap, of course, for the wine. These are $50.50 while they last. It's like a one and done deal for us. So if you're interested, go ahead and pick that up. It's kind of neat. You don't get a cork pen very often. I remember they sold pretty well years ago when we had the opportunity to get it, and the opportunity came up again, so we jumped on it. Got 2 more pens for you. Okay, the Esterbrook SD Blue Moon. This is a special edition from Esterbrook. There's 2 versions of it. So there's a piston version and a cartridge converter version. So if you like the internal piston, that one's $225. The cartridge converter one is $175. So that's cool. It's a really nice looking material, a quartz-like material. These are steel nibs, but they do have some custom grinds on here that are kind of unique to Esterbrook. One of which they added with this pen called the mini stub. So if you're familiar with like a cursive fine italic, that's kind of what this is like. So it basically takes a fine nib and stubifies it. It writes really nice. If you write really big, it doesn't make that much of a difference, but if you write small, it can look really cool. And it's, I don't know, I like it because it embellishes the writing just a little bit. So you pay a little bit of premium for that extra grinding work. But you know, I don't know how readily available they'll be. We're gonna try to keep stock of them, but you know, they are custom ground, one at a time. So yeah, it's kind of cool. So that is now available on this pen. I don't know if they're gonna do the mini stub on other pens. It's possible, but I know they're at least launching it on this one. So you can check that one out. And then last pen I have is the Platinum 3776 Century Coffee Jelly. I did not know what this was. I mean, I can sort of piece it together, But, you know, I'm thinking like, I've heard of bulletproof coffee. I've heard of all, you know, people putting coconut oil and all kinds of things in the coffee. So at first I was like, are people putting like jelly, like peanut butter and jelly in their coffee? Is that what coffee jelly is? I was like, that sounds gross. No, that's not what it is. So it's like a jellified coffee, you know, like Jello type thing, I guess. I don't know. I've never had it, but apparently this is the thing. So the whole collection that they're coming out with, this is the first of a collection apparently that Platinum's going to do in a limited series called My Favorite Things. And coffee jelly, it is a menu item at Kissa-ten, which is, it means a tea drinking shop in Japan. So it's a Japanese style tea room that also serves coffee. So sort of like a low-key coffee house, basically. Because apparently the normal coffee houses they have there, they also like serve alcohol, and they're more like party with your friends, celebratory type of vibe. So they, you know, the popularity of the like tea drinking shops became, this is much more of your low key, you know, kind of like you have, you know, Italian or American coffee shops, you know, cafe kind of a thing. So it's sort of like that vibe, I think. Never been to one, but that's what I understand it to be. And I guess this is a popular item that's served at those types of establishments. So to acknowledge that, I guess, the pen has a dark brown cap, very, very slightly translucent, very slightly. It's got that same color on the grip and on the body finial as well. And then it's got a lighter sort of reddish brown body. That's the cherry that's often on top of the coffee jelly. So it's nice theming there. And the color kind of works. It's got a 14 karat gold nib, just like all the Platinums. This is a little more expensive because it's a special pen, $460 on this one. They're limiting it to 2,000 pens globally. But, excuse me, if you like Platinum pens and you like this theme, I mean, coffee theme stuff, it's kind of awesome. I can't resist it myself. It also comes with a special ink. So it comes in this cool little bottle that you only get with some of those special Platinum pens. And it's an ink called Dark Syrup. So it's like a, deep brown color. So that's kind of nice. We haven't swabbed that yet because it's going to be very limited just to the pen. But you're probably going to ask to see what it looks like. And I don't know. We'll see. That's it for new stuff. Okay, so there's a bunch. There's more stuff coming, but that's it for now. Let's get into the questions, shall we? No, company updates. That's what we're doing next. Company updates. Okay, just a couple of quick ones. One is weather. So currently I'm watching it like sleet and freezing rain outside. The rest of the company has gone home. We knew a storm was coming. They were calling for like upwards of like 7 inches of snow, which is a lot for where we are. It's been like a ½ inch of snow, and now it's just like sleet and ice and stuff like that. So that's not great because it doesn't really matter if you have all-wheel drive in the ice. So I will be driving home very, very slowly. But anyway, I'm staying here just so I can record this for you all because I want to get it done. And if I didn't feel safe driving, don't worry, I'm not putting myself in danger or whatever, but I will be driving home very slow. So weather has been a thing. We haven't lost power or anything yet, but with a lot of ice that could happen. That happens to us a lot around here. So we'll see how that goes. Could be some disruption here, but that'll all be done and over. It's going to be in like the high to 50s or something by the time this video publishes. So weather is like up and down and all around right now. We are going to be closed on Monday. So it's President's Day, national holiday. So February 17th, Monday, we'll be closed. So if you're reaching out to us or whatever, we're not going to be shipping packages that day. But we try really hard to get as caught up as possible before holidays like that. And then I got a video out. This is more of like my relaxing style videos, just inking up some pens and kind of playing with them. I have one on the Pilot Custom 823 with the Pilot Blue ink that comes with the Custom 823. I did not spill this on myself. This was actually the first video of that style, of that like relaxing style that I recorded, even though it's the third one that we published like that. So I don't know. I'll see how you like it. It's a little bit shorter, but if you like that style, I'm really enjoying making those, so we can get some more going. All right, now we can get into the questions. First question we have is from Lucios, who says, "So good to wake up to another episode of Q&A. What is your opinion on Snorkel filling systems?" I don't know about systems. I think there's just one, but I have one, so I'll show you. Do you think that they should make a comeback? Also, what is the one filling system that you would want to never die out? Thank you for all the great videos. Keep up the great work. Greetings from the country with more cats than people. I don't know what country that is. I will have to look that up. So, Snorkel pens. Super cool. As like a tinkerer, kind of gear junkie, I think it's one of the coolest things. This is why I'm not a big vintage pen guy, because I have to cut myself off somewhere. I would fall deep into the abyss if I got into vintage stuff. So I have enough. I have a few key ones, and the Sheaffer Snorkel was one that I needed to have for exactly this reason, for these types of questions. It is a super cool mechanism. If you're not familiar with it, I'm going to show you what it looks like right now. It is not that practical these days. It's extremely complicated. It's a repairing nightmare. So it is not practical to have anymore. I don't think they should bring it back. Unless there was a way to re-engineer it to not be as complicated. I don't know how they would do that. But anyway, it's a really, really cool pen. I don't know. There's part of me that would want to see them bring it back just because it is so neat. But I know that it's not. Like there's no pen repair infrastructure in place to deal with a pen that's this complicated. But let me show it to you so you know what the heck I'm talking about. All right, here we go. This is a Sheaffer Snorkel. I've got a burgundy one. I don't know when they were made. 60s maybe? I'm not sure. Any of you who know more about the Sheaffer Snorkel, please share. I'm not trying to make this a history lesson. I can't remember all these facts, but I can at least show you how this pen works. So the whole idea behind the Snorkel is that when your ink level gets low in a bottle, it gets hard to fill the pen because most pens have a filler hole that's right tucked up underneath the grip, right where the feed kind of meets the grip. So you got to submerge, you know, basically this much, pretty much the entire nib into your bottle of ink to be able to draw ink up in it, right? Well, Sheaffer's solution to that was to develop what's called the Snorkel. So I'm going to show you what it looks like. It's pretty wild. So if I unscrew the back here, this little tube comes out, right? Cool. And it comes out that far. And then I keep unscrewing, and that is letting the piston down. You know, so it's expelling excess air out of the pen and so on. Oh, just kidding. It's not a piston. That's right. It's a bladder filler. Okay, that's right. Sorry, I haven't used this in a while. It's a bladder filler. So you unscrew it. That moves the Snorkel mechanism down. There's a bladder inside here, and when you push it down, I believe that depresses the bladder. And then when it like reinflates or whatever, it draws ink up into the pen. So you do that a few times, sort of like a vacuum filler, but it's not a vacuum. Really, it's a bladder. I can sort of hear it pushing air out. So you do that a few times, but really all you need to do is get the end of the Snorkel down into your bottle of ink. And then you fill it, you know, like so, you know, like I just demonstrated. And then when you go to screw the cap back on, you know, it's securing itself in there, but then you keep screwing it, and then it retracts the Snorkel back up into the pen. And then you're good to go. And theoretically, you don't get your nib or anything inked up, so you wouldn't even need to wipe anything off. That's the idea. So very cool concept. You can imagine the intricacies of the engineering and the parts and pieces that are inside this thing. Plus, there's a bladder inside there. So that bladder is going to break down over time. Repairing this thing is a whole ordeal. And, well, this is vintage, so it's like you can't even get these parts anymore. But super cool technology. I think it's a really neat pen. I almost never use it because I don't ever want to have to get it repaired. And I like to be able to demonstrate it. But very cool, wonderful piece of history. And, yeah, now you know what it is. So to the second part of that question, which was, what is the one filling system that I would want to never die out? I guess of like things currently made. I don't know. I guess there's some like sort of complicated ones. There's a really cool one that, you know, Conid made. That's like sort of a vacuum filler, but like the vacuum sort of detaches from it. That's cool, but it's like they really make very limited pens. That's really cool, but I can't really say like I would never want it to go away because it's not really here so much. So I'm going to go a little more mainstream and say vacuum fillers. You know, I think they're really, really cool. I love the pretty much like demonstrator aspect of them. They hold a big amount of ink. They seal themselves off. They're just very practical, and something about like just the mechanics of pumping that thing, it just feels so special, you know, compared to, you know, a non-vacuum filling pen. And it's just, I don't know, I really love it. So that would be my answer, is vacuum fillers. All right. Ann Wagner says, I have a question that has puzzled me. I have the LAMY Violet Blackberry pen with an extra fine nib. I keep it inked with the matching ink from a cartridge. I am wondering why when I first start a new cartridge, I agitate the ink, but the strong gold sheen isn't there. With the first cartridge, the sheen started up a couple of weeks later and stayed strong for as long as the cartridge lasted. I tested it on the same paper, Clairefontaine, a few days apart. There was no sheen for the first tests, then tons of sheen a few days later. I just started a new cartridge a week ago, and again, there is no sheen. I hope that it will come along later since I really like it. Actually, I just tested it again, and the sheen is coming back! Just in the periods and other dots in a couple of parts of the lines. Weird! Why do you think that happens? And do you think using a broader nib would help the sheen be there sooner? Thank you. So yes, sheen is incredibly affected by the paper that you use, which it sounds like Clairefontaine, that's you know, the right type of paper. You want a really ink-resistant paper because the sheen is only going to appear when the ink has the ability to kind of like pool up and kind of dry on the surface of the page. If it all soaks into the paper, you're not going to see any sheen. It's essentially going to have sort of like a matte finish, which then doesn't sheen. You know what I mean? So you need to have essentially like shininess. You know, you need to have enough ink on there where it like really dries on top of itself, you know, and then you see more of that sheen. And it's impacted by how much of the ink you put down. Really, it's all about how much of the ink you're like seeing on the surface. So ink resistant paper plus put down a ton of ink, you're going to see the most sheen. That's really just how it works. So when you're using a cartridge, especially when you're first installing that cartridge, think about it. If you're using a bottle of ink, you're drawing ink up through that feed. So you're priming it, you're getting that thing soaked, and then you're filling the reservoir of the converter or piston or whatever it is. And then that thing is like charged up, loaded up, ready to go. And it starts writing with its full gusto, maybe even wetter than it normally will be once it kind of hits its regular flow. A cartridge is kind of the opposite because you're installing a cartridge onto the back of the pen. The feed and everything, if you just recently cleaned it or if it's a brand new pen, that thing is bone dry. So the ink has to sort of like work its way down there. And it will, you know, it will at first, but it takes a little bit of time to get its like full flow. Now, the more you write with it, the broader, the wetter it is, the faster you're going to get to that point where you're putting a lot of, you know, the regular amount of ink down. But basically, cartridge pens are going to write drier with less ink, less flow when you first install them. Couple that with you have an extra fine nib. So it's just putting down less ink. So it's going to take you more time to get to that point of regular flow anyway. So really it all comes down to putting down a lot of ink and getting that flow going. So kind of twofold to answer your question. Yeah, this is totally normal and fully expected. So I will say if you're doing this when you first get a pen or you've just cleaned it and you've got like water or kind of like mostly air and stuff in there, it's going to take a little bit. One thing that you can help with a cartridge, you know, you've got a LAMY here. That's what you're using. So those LAMY cartridges are kind of squishy. You know, they're like disposable plastic. Not all cartridges are so easy to compress. Most of them kind of are though. Standard international cartridges, they got some give to them. Pilot, you can do that. Sailor, you can do that. Platinum is really the only cartridges that are so tough you really can't squeeze them. But LAMY ones you definitely can. So once you install the cartridge, you can actually squeeze the cartridge and that's going to like force more of that ink down through. That will get the thing primed up and get it going. So that is like modus operandi for me. Whenever I install a cartridge into a dry pen or something like that, I'm always like forcing that ink down through. So that's a good practice to kind of skip and speed things up, so you don't have to wait weeks for that sheen to come through. Because what's happening is like it's just not putting down the full amount of ink. You're probably like just on that border with that extra fine nib, where you need just a little bit more ink to start seeing that sheen coming through. And then once it hits its stride, then you're good to go until you use up the cartridge. But then think about it too. If you're using up the cartridge, it's sort of like dry again. There might be some ink left in there, but even if you're reinstalling a cartridge of the same ink color, you kind of have like a mostly dry feed again. So that time I would think would be a little reduced from like when the pen was brand new and bone dry. But still, when you're installing the cartridge, you got to kind of get it going again. So that's where squeezing the back of the cartridge can help to get it flowing again. Now you squeeze it too much and you'll like have the stuff like dripping out of the pen. That's okay. That's part of the experience. But you can prime it by squeezing it like that. And then the second part of your question, using a broader nib, yes, that will absolutely get you more sheen because it's putting more ink down. So it's going to be a balance. If you're used to an extra fine and you like to write small and things like that, that is always the trade-off between being able to write small, having an extra fine nib, something like that, and being able to see like the most, I don't know, impressive aspects of ink, whether it's sheen, shimmer, shading, all the shushes, all those things. If you want to shush your pen or your ink, you need a broader nib and you need a wet writing pen. So you can do that, and that helps. So yeah, get a broader nib. That would do it. But try the squeezing thing. You don't have to buy anything. Just squeeze the cartridge, and I think you'll like what you get. So great question though, and really fun ink. All right, next one. I got a quick question here from Jeff Brown. Says, does anyone currently make an oblique double broad that's not $800? Well, oblique double broad is a very obscure nib. If you're not familiar with what an oblique nib is, if you know what a stub nib is, you know, it's like a regular nib is round. Stub nib is sort of like pill-shaped, I guess. You know, it's like, it's going to be thinner on the cross stroke, wider on the downstroke. An oblique nib is sort of like a stub, but it's ground kind of at an angle. So what it's really kind of meant for, it's kind of a specific use case, but it's if you rotate your pen in a little bit, like rotate it towards your center. So they make what are called like right-footed and left-footed oblique nibs. Essentially, like if you're right-handed and you tend to turn inward when you write, that oblique does that. So it gets you sort of a hybrid stubbish kind of a thing. It's not drastic usually. It's usually pretty subtle, but you can get some more stub-like writing. But on a double broad, that's a really wet writing nib. So there are some people who like to use those. If you like to use an oblique double broad, you know it, and you will search it out because it's not that common to find. Typically you're into like high-end gold nib pens at that point because they're just not common enough to mass produce. So the one pen that I know that does make it that is less than $800 is the LAMY 2000. Now, we can't get it regularly here in the US. Eons ago, we had imported some as like a special order kind of a thing, and had some like double broads and obliques and things like that. But they weren't that popular, and we were only ever to get one shipment. And it's just too logistically complicated for us to get them regularly. But I know they're out there. Probably some European sellers might have some. So if you go searching for it, you can find an oblique double broad LAMY 2000. Now, I don't know what you're going to pay for it, but you know, probably $200, something like that, or euros or whatever, you know, whatever the currency is where you happen to find it. So I will say too that like I think your best option is going to be get a double broad pen that you want and then get it custom ground to oblique double broad. Then you can really get it kind of fine-tuned how you like it. You know, nib professionals, you know, grind that kind of stuff all day long. They can do it in their sleep. But you're not going to find mass-produced oblique double broads pretty much anywhere. And when you do, they're going to be really expensive because it's a lot of work to do them, for one. And they sell so rarely that, you know, it's going to be more expensive. So yeah, get a custom grind. That's my advice. From Mrs. in Tennessee. Do you know if Conklin is ever going to improve their nib and feed systems? Yes, they have. So Conklin back in the day, they did not have Yovo made nibs, and, you know, they had, you know, more kind of like, I don't know where they were getting their nibs exactly, but they were not Yovo. So they got Yovo nibs. This was several years ago at this point, but you can kind of tell a little bit that they are, because the design changed a little bit. So that was definitely an improvement. However, there was an improvement they made. They didn't make a big announcement about it, and it's not visually apparent. So it's kind of hard to make an announcement. It was a rolling change that they did, and it wasn't really that talked about. So I'm talking about it now. So newer Conklins that are coming out now, so like any new released pen that would be coming out now has this. Ones that are already existing models, it's going to be tough because it depends on an individual retailer and when they might sell through their existing stock. So it's really hard to say when this cutover may sort of be happening. But new pens that are being released, I know, have the new feeds on them. So from what I understand, they didn't make like design changes per se, but they're having something that they call like plasma treated feeds. I don't exactly know what that is. It sounds a bit magical, but basically there's like there's a treatment that they do to help clean them and prepare them to improve their flow. That's essentially what this thing is meant to do. So it's like it's like a big device, sort of somewhat like a microwave, something like that, that they end up putting these feeds into. And for whatever, however it cooks it, cleans it, whatever thing is happening, it's kind of a proprietary deal. But whatever is happening in there, it improves the flow and makes it more consistent. And it's hard because I don't have like direct comparisons. Maybe I'll try and find some that I can like more confirm. But I can definitely say through our customer service here that we have seen far fewer complaints and far of the newer, not just Conklins, but Monteverdes, because they use the same feeds. Far fewer complaints and just a lot more satisfaction feedback overall about the flow, particularly with OmniFlex nibs, because they demand more ink. Now they're still steel nib flex, you know, they're still going to have their limits, but I've heard a lot better feedback about it, and I've experienced for myself more positive results since that's happened. So I don't know what experience you have and how old your pens are and where you got them and all that kind of stuff, but I can say that moving forward, I think we can expect improved flow because they've, you know, to their credit, they've been listening and they're trying to make improvements. So that's definitely something. And then, you know, there was a comment from Tony Proctor's here on the last video that said, I use the OmniFlex nib from the beginning. The newest version I have is amazing. As far as comfortably springy and precise, I agree, and I highly recommend for the Ritma carbon fiber. So the nature of the question from last week was about the softness of a nib. But, you know, that's just one example of like, you know, this is somebody that's been around for a while and has noticed these improvements over time. So that's feedback I've gotten pretty consistently, you know, but of course, individual experiences may vary, but take that for what it's worth. They are making some improvements. Next one, MH7_256 says, is there a difference between Rollerball and Ballpoint pens? Ask the fountain pen guy, of course. Also, I will gladly take all the coffee-themed pens and all the purple pens, LOL. I would probably buy them all lock, stock, and barrel if I could. Right there with you. Yes, there's a difference between Rollerball and Ballpoint. In fact, there's a difference between different types of rollerballs even. Now, I will say I'm going to have to lump some things into categories here. There's like proprietary designs and formulations of ink and stuff like that that vary within a given type of pen. So Ballpoint, for example. I'm going to generalize and speak more or less how they work, but there may be some that work slightly differently. But the basic idea behind a Ballpoint pen, you know, like a, oh, let's see, what do I got over here? I got to go like hunting for one because I don't really ever use them. Do I even have one? I got this like old school Caran d'Ache one, which you can't really see anything, but it's a ballpoint pen, right? So the way that a ballpoint pen works is there's a ball in here. There's a tiny, tiny little spring behind that ball. When you press down on it, the ball lets up just a little bit, and the ball rotates as well. What's happening is as that ball is rotating, there's a paste ink. It's a thick ink that's inside the refill. And it's you know, if you lopped off the end of it, the ink would just stay right in there because it's very thick. But it heats up with friction. So when you're moving the ball, it's creating friction, which creates heat, which then allows the paste to sort of melt, swirls around the ball, and as you're writing on the page, that is what is causing it to leave a mark on the page. That's why if you haven't used a ballpoint pen in a while, you know, it's sort of like maybe dried up a little bit in there. It kind of sticks because the paste is like a paste. It's like a glue almost that holds onto that ball. So you got to like scribble and get it going so that you sort of free up the ball again. And while you're scribbling, you're creating friction, which is then melting that paste ink and gets it flowing again. So that's why you have to like scribble to get a ballpoint going, if you didn't know that. So they make different types. The Caran d'Ache one, I will say, is like one of the best writing ballpoints I've ever used. But so it probably has to do with like the quality of the precision of it, the paste, however it's formulated and whatnot. But it's still a ballpoint. That's the design. Now with a rollerball, the technology is somewhat similar. You're still dealing with, you know, a refill, right? With a ball on the end that you're writing with. However, the ink formulation is different. So there's a Pilot G2, one of the most recognizable out there. So this one, you can see the ink in here, and then there's like this, you know, what looks like gel up at the top. So this stuff is a higher density. It's got more weight to it than the rest of the ink. So it's, for one, it's kind of sealing it back there, but it's actually helping to compress the ink down as you're writing with it. And it's just basically more fluid. It flows easier. I don't know how much the friction of the ball moving is a factor here as opposed to ballpoints. I imagine there's some degree of it, but basically it is less viscous. I always get this mixed up. Less viscous, which means it flows easier. So that's why gel roller balls start easier. They feel easier. They run out sooner. If you've ever, I experienced this when I first started making pens a long time ago, 18 years ago. When I was replacing, with the pens that I was making, I was replacing all ballpoint refills with gel roller balls. And the feedback I always got from people who bought my pens was, these refills run out so quick. Well, what it is because, for one, they write, if they get a pen that they like, they'll write with it more. And when you're writing with the same pen, y'all know because you're fountain pen people, if you're writing with the same pen over and over again, you're going to go through it faster and notice that you've gone through it faster than you would if you're just picking up a random pen here and there and you're not really paying attention to it. So that's part of it. But also the ink it flows out more. You're going to use it up more than you would the equivalent of a paste ink in a ballpoint. Now there's another type of rollerball. Shame on me, I don't have the Pilot version of this, but it's the same example. This is a Staedtler. If you ever see one like this, the Pilot Precise is a really, kind of famous one that's out there. It uses a liquid ink, more similar to a fountain pen ink. And it has like a feed system in here. It's got like a wick, kind of a fibrous wick in there, but it's got a fin like feed system in here, and it has a roller ball, but it's using essentially fountain pen ink in it. So it's even less viscous than you would get with a gel roller ball, and certainly more so than a paste ballpoint. So it really has to do with the thickness of the ink. Ballpoint is the thickest, gel rollerball is thinner than that, liquid ink rollerball thinner than that, writes even better. My personal favorite pen before I was fountain pen enlightened was the Pilot Precise. I had no idea how the ink worked or anything. I just knew that I liked the way that that wrote better. I was just a fountain pen aficionado who hadn't discovered fountain pens yet. But then, of course, fountain pens are the best because they flow the smoothest. So there you go. That's basically the answer to your question. Now, I will say I've researched this a bunch. I've learned some fun things. I answer questions like this, but I've thought maybe, because I've done like Fountain Pen 101 and a whole series there, and I do cover some of the basics of this in Fountain Pen 101, especially in part 1, what is a fountain pen? Link somewhere up here, I think, if you want to go check that out. But I'm thinking about maybe making a video in more detail about other types of pens, like felt pens, different types of roller balls, things like that, trying to really cover sort of like the gamut of pens. And so you can see, because as I've learned how pens work more and more, I do notice that there's a very strong correlation between the thickness of the ink and how smoothly it feels and how awesome the pen is. Fountain pens being the best, of course. But not a lot of people really know that. So I don't know, I've thought about that as like more of a, not so much for like you hardcore tried and true fountain pen fans, but to really just help educate, the masses, if you will, here on YouTube about like how different types of pens work and how a fountain pen slots into all those. I'd never had it like fully broken down like that for me before, but I've had it on my mind maybe of doing something like that. So let me know if you think that would be of interest. I know it's not like total bullseye for the type of stuff we do, but hits on kind of a lot of what I covered in this question here today. So I'm thinking about that. We'll see. All right, last question for the week. I have the Delta pen. Oh, sorry, this is from Prairie22. I have the Delta pen. This is the Spaccanapoli in the Terra colorway, and absolutely love how the resin looks. Quick question for the next episode. This was asked on last week's episode, so here we are. Is it possible to swap out the nib at all? Yes, and I want to show that to you because I think it's kind of cool. So let me do that right now. Okay, here we are. This is the Spaccanapoli. And the nice thing about this is it uses some somewhat standard stuff. You've heard me say the word Jowo a lot. Major nib manufacturer in Germany. Bock is another big one over there. The challenging thing about that is the housing that they use to hold the nib in the feed has a different thread pattern between Bock and Jowo. So even though the nib and the feed are very similar and essentially swappable, you can't swap out the whole nib units between pens that use those different thread patterns. So this is a cartridge converter pen. I'm going to remove this, get down to its essence here. This is what makes a fountain pen a fountain pen. So essentially this grip is just a shroud. It's just a lovely packaging that goes on the outside of this, which is if you boil down a fountain pen to its essence, I can essentially throw a cartridge or put something on here, and this is a fountain pen. I have an ink reservoir, I have a feed, I have a nib. We're good to go. Now it would dry out, it would not be very practical, but this is basically the elements inside the pen that actually get it to work. So when you have a housing like this that's more or less a standard size, because Delta is not making their own, they're getting it from Jowo. A bunch of different pen makers do that. Not all of them. LAMY makes their own, Pilot makes their own, Platinum makes their own, Sailor, all that. There's a lot of companies that make their own, so none of this applies really. But for this one, it does apply. So here's the nib housing. You can actually get a whole spare housing from our good friends at Edison Pens. And there might even be some others out there. Now, because they're using Jowo as well, everything's the same. Thread pattern's the same, all that. So literally I can unscrew this one out of here. I can screw this one into the grip of my Delta, and boom, I've now swapped the nib. Really pretty simple. Now on some pens out there, it may be tighter fitting in there. You may or may not be able to get the housing out. Thankfully on this one, when I grab it, I'm not touching the tip. I'm not grabbing the wings. I'm grabbing the top and the bottom like this, kind of pinching it there. And that's the safest way to do that. However, we have at Goulet Pens spare nibs. No housing, right? So you can get just the nib and you can swap it out that way. So if you wanted to just swap it out with a spare nib that you have, ours or otherwise, you can do so. I'm going to reassemble the pen to show you kind of how that works. But But basically, you can leave the housing in there. The way that I like to remove the nib in the feed is, you know, I support the shiny side of the nib with my finger, my pointer. I take my thumb like this. I grab onto the pen like this, so I'm not, you know, I'm not going like this because it's less controlled. But if I go like this and I push out like so, I have a lot more control. There you go. So I'm grabbing, pressing kind of together firmly, and then nib and feed together, I'm pulling them out. So there's friction fit inside of there. And now you can see the feed's pretty long, right? Like there's a lot of fins going on there. You may not realize that's all that's going on there. So yeah, that's how it works. So, and then in the housing here, at least with the Delta, with the Yovo ones especially, there's actually a very slight notch in the housing to accommodate the feed. So it has to go in a particular way. So be aware of that. But so, you know, here I got the Delta. I take that nib off. I've got an identical number 6 Yovo nib. Hey, look at that. I want to match it up, you know, just like this, like you would see it normally on a pen. Maybe take a picture of your pen if you aren't familiar with what that looks like. You're doing it for the first time. So I'm going to grab it like this, and then I need to look in here to make sure that the little indentation there that I have to fit the nib is accurate. If I'm not aligned with that, I can still sort of fit it in, but it's going to give me resistance like right away, and I'm going to really have to shove it in there. If you feel like you're having to force it, you're probably doing it wrong. So some pens like Pilot, theirs is just round, so you can stick it in any which way. But on these ones, with the Yovo ones, they have to go in a certain orientation. And then when you do, it sort of just plops right in there. It stops when it hits the back, and then you just kind of make sure that, you know, if the nib is like all weird off to the side like that, you just kind of align it in the center, and then there you go. Look at that, Goulet nib on a Delta. Now, I will say, they're not going to warranty somebody else's nib. Any nib swapping, any housing swapping or whatever, you're obviously taking your pen's, you know, fate into your own hands, but it's totally doable. As long as you don't mess anything up beyond all recognition, you know, you can always swap it back. You can just enjoy your pen. You know, it's your pen. Do whatever the heck you want with it. So there you go. That's how you do it. Put it back on there. There we go. Boom. Slide that back down a little bit. Perfect. So I got my Delta nib back on there, and I'm good to go. So yes, you have the option to do that. This is one of the more swappable pens out there that you can get. But the nib that comes on, it's pretty great too. So really, unless you want to get like a different nib size or something, or you damage the nib or something like that, you're probably gonna be pretty happy with what's on here. All right, I'm skipping the pen spotlight this week because bad weather, and I probably already should be getting out of here. But anyway, I'll have some to show in the future for sure, because we got some new pens that are starting to kind of flow in now, and I want to show you some of them because they're pretty cool. But let's talk about some of my adventures that I've been up to. Definitely some excitement with the snow, you know, getting the house ready. You know, last time we had a snowstorm that hit, my snow shovel had broken and there were none to be found. So I had to use just like a square shovel. Not the most fun thing. So I made sure, I was like, I'm going to make note. In between this storm and the next one, I'm going to go and get a snow shovel once the store restocks. And they restocked, and I got one. So now I have a snow shovel. And so that's what I will be doing as soon as I get home, I'm sure. So yeah, that, getting salt, getting all this stuff. You know, we're in a kind of a rural area, and we're not on city water. So if we lose power, we also lose water. So I decided years ago to invest in a generator so that we don't end up getting like totally off the grid, because I'm not, I mean, it's fine if I want to do that intentionally, but I don't want to do that unintentionally. So, you know, I have to pull that every now and then, run it, test it, make sure the gas is still good, all that kind of stuff. So, you know, all those fun things that I'm like, I'll do that later, you know, kind of thing. And then it's like, oh, there's a snowstorm coming. Oh, okay. Got to run to the grocery store. Got to do all this stuff. So yeah, just a lot of that stuff. It's been exciting. We've gotten more winter weather here than we've had in like probably 5 years. So that's been fun. Had a fun little project. My son is like super into Gunpla with Gundam, you know, building like plastic model robots. He talks about it so much, and bless his heart, you know, I love that he's so passionate about them. I think they're pretty cool, but I also like, I got enough going on, so I don't get as into them, obviously. But I've built them with him. You know, I'll cut out the pieces and he'll, you know, assemble, or we'll swap off sometimes. He's really made it his own. But, you know, it's kind of like a thing that we do together. So eventually it just, he would, you know, I take him to the stores that have them and he's looking at them and I'm sitting there around like, okay, what do I do while I'm here? So I've like sort of gotten into them a little bit, just enough to be like, okay, I'm spending time to be with my son and these things. Let me get my own. Let me get my own Gundam. So I'd already gotten these tiny little ones that we sort of did together, but I was like, let me get an actual one. So I got one. If you're into Gundam at all, I'll move on quickly and not talk about this, but if you're into it, I got the Destiny, the RG level kit, which is like a slightly more detailed version. It's the Destiny Gundam Zaft Mobile Suit ZGMF X42S, which I'm sure you just know off the top of your head. Gundam is crazy. I think they've made over 2,000 different robot models over the 40 years that they've been doing it, 45 years they've been doing it. I think it started in 1980 and it's still going. It's pretty wild. But it's really cool. So my son's super into that. I'm like very slowly building that kit. But it's fun. It's kind of like, you know, somewhat meditative, I guess. Doing that. I'm journaling more. Again, you know, I've talked about journaling last week a lot. I'm practicing it more. Really going to try to intentionally pay attention to that more and maybe be a little more disciplined about it. It's really, I'm on a journey. I'm not an expert on journaling, but I have my own mental health things, you know, specialties, if you will, just like all of us. You know, so as I'm working through things, you know, I'm finding it helpful to kind of work that into part of my regimen, right? So I'm really encouraged by the responses that I got in last week's video to see like how much that really resonates with people. And I knew that would be the case because, you know, anytime I talk to, you know, pen fans, that comes up organically a lot, especially when it comes to therapy, like journaling for therapy's sake, not just like writing down what I had for lunch today, but like really trying to like work through some stuff. And like, it really makes sense to me why that is that way and why specifically like fountain pens would pair so well with that, because they're already such a personal kind of experience. And once you really love what you're writing with, you want to write more anyway. And me personally, like I talk a lot. Don't know if you noticed that, but you know, Rachel's more introverted. She may not want to hear every thought that I have in my head at the end of the day. So it can be really helpful to me to process things in that form, you know, sort of self-processing a little bit as I'm journaling things out, whether it's just like ideas or whether it's feelings, emotions. I can actually articulate some stuff better with having to slow down a little bit, not just word vomiting all over whoever's listening to me, but really thinking through my thoughts and writing them down, being somewhat limited by the speed of the writing, but then also like the tactile nature of it. It just hits different, as the kids would say, as my kids would cringe as I'm trying to be cool. But I don't know. I'm vibing with whatever that is right there. And I don't know exactly what to do around that, but I feel like more people should know about that and how to get into that. So I'm thinking about that. Don't know what to do with that, but it's coming, I'm sure, because I'm not shaking this. I'm getting, it's picking up steam in my brain. And I think more than ever now, people need ways to process what's on their mind. I think journaling is such a good way to do that. So that's a thing. Okay. Let's lighten up the conversation a little bit here. And then last thing is like, I'm continuing to play a lot of music. I've tried, so I'm playing bass guitar a lot. You know, I really enjoyed that. I played that a lot in high school and college. Picked it back up and I'm just having a blast. I think I'm at the point now on bass guitar where I'm actually better now than I ever was, because, you know, I was younger, I had more energy, whatever, but also, you know, I'm not going to say I didn't have the discipline, because I like went to a military school. I was pretty disciplined, but I I also just had so many other things. It's funny. I say I had so many other things going on, but I'm like, I have a lot going on right now. I run a friggin' business and have kids and a house. And like, I obviously have a lot going on now too. I don't know what it is. Maybe just life experience. Maybe just everything is, you know, kind of culminated over time. And so some things are easier for me to kind of pick up and learn. Guitar, bass guitar, those are things that I think already, even just after like really, it's been like 6-7 months since I really picked them back up. And I think I'm as good now as I ever was. Now that probably says more about how good I ever was. I was never that amazing. But I've been practicing more regularly. My calluses are built up. My fingers are getting stronger. It's like anything else. You practice it, you get better. But just for fun, like my kids love metal. They love, like speed metal. Not the like, you know, really kind of dark stuff or the harsh language or anything. But they love Sonic the Hedgehog. They love Sonic Frontiers, the game. There's some pretty awesome music in that game. So as I'm driving my kids around and because I drive them to school every morning, that's pretty much, you know, like I have a daughter and a son. They're different ages, obviously. But that's like one thing in common they can pretty much always agree on that they want to listen to. So we listen to it a lot in the car. And as I've listened to it, I'm like, there's some pretty rock and bass lines in some of these songs. So I was like, just for fun, let me mess around and see if I can play along with any of these. Of course, I'm a total hack, but you know, songs like, if you happen to be a Sonic fan or your kids are, Fist Bump, Break Through It All, Find Your Flame, I'm Here. They're all Sonic Frontiers songs, and they hit pretty hard. So that's a lot of fun. I've been jamming along with that, just really enjoying it. Continuing to play acoustic and electric as well, and Barry sax. I'm loving it all. Music has become such a stress reliever for me. That is another healthy outlet, an avenue, something to get excited about, something to work towards improving. You know, I'm motivated in that way. So yeah, that's what I've been doing recently. So just really trying to find the things that I enjoy in life to balance out some of the things that are harder and more stressful, right? So that is, I think, all that we can ever do, really, right? Finding healthy outlets for things. Yeah, so that's it for me now. Even though we have President's Day next week, I'm still planning on doing Q&A as normal. My week will just be a little more compressed. Let's go ahead and wrap up for this week, shall we? Just want to thank you for watching. It's great to be here. You know, I look and it's like not as many comments, not as many views as maybe we used to have back, you know, earlier. YouTube's changed a lot of things in their algorithm and stuff. I've talked to a lot of other people who do YouTube a lot. There's a lot of AI stuff on there. A lot of people's numbers are down. And it's easy to kind of get discouraged about that sometimes, especially when you invest so much time into it. But I don't know what it is. Like, you can't do nearly 300 episodes of something solo unless you really are passionate about it and enjoy doing it. And just like these Q&As, I do it for you all, obviously, but I also do it for me because I enjoy doing it. I enjoy connecting with you all. I enjoy sharing what I've learned and inspiring, writing and pens and all kinds of stuff. So I don't know, just a little heart to heart there. It's not always the easiest thing for me to make time to do these things. And I know it's not going to be the most viral thing. It's fountain pens. You know what I mean? I'm not going to be a Mr. Beast. But the authenticity of the comments that I read from you all, especially in the last few months as I've tried to like reboot the Q&A stuff, it's been some of the most meaningful stuff to me, especially with how hard things have been sometimes. So I really appreciate that and just want to continue to do that despite a lot of craziness in the outside world. A lot of factors that are trying to make this difficult for me to do. I really appreciate getting to share this time with you all. So, didn't know I was going to get all soft on you at the end there. But anyway, thank you for engaging me. If you're watching the video at this point, you're here because you are like the real deal. You know what I mean? Like, y'all are my people. So just want to thank you for that. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. On that note, I have a fun fact for you all. a fun fact for you all about snowflakes. So obviously I have snow coming down right now, so snow is very much on my brain. But have you ever heard the like the statement or the sentiment that there's, you know, no snowflakes are identical, or the no two snowflakes are alike? Well, I was curious if that's actually true, because there's been a lot of snowflakes, you know, and I'm like, we have so much of everything recorded. According to Guinness World Records, in 1988, Nancy Knight, a scientist at the National Center for Atmosphere Research in Boulder, Colorado, found 2 identical samples under a microscope while studying snow crystals from a storm in Wisconsin. Now, I'm curious more context around how that happened. How did snowflakes from Wisconsin make it to Colorado? I don't even know, but apparently I was disappointed because Guinness did not have a picture of the 2 snowflakes. I feel like that would have been receipts, you know what I mean? Like that would have been like, okay, this is cool. So maybe I need to dig a little deeper on that. But apparently, at least according to them, for whatever authority that they have, there have been 2 identical snowflakes out there, but it's still pretty friggin' rare. Anyway, that's my fun fact for this week. Hope you all stay warm or cold if you're in a warm part of the of the earth right now. Thanks for spending this time with me. Looking forward to seeing you again next week, and right on. And then I don't know if I can do it. I guess I'll do a little tag, do a little segment here. I guess I need the microphone, huh? So maybe Tyler, maybe you can slice this out. I'll shoot it with my phone too to mix it up a little bit. But I'm going to read off a punchier version of what we're covering this week. Okay. In Goulet Q&A this week, we are going to be talking about swapping nibs on a Delta Spaccanapoli, which is so fun to say. I'm going to be talking about oblique double broad nibs. Is that even real? Lots of other fun stuff too. Get my hands on some pens like a Schaefer Snorkel. It's going to be a good time. Looking forward to spending time with you. Go check it out.